Hi everyone, it's Emily, and I'm here to talk about psychology in the spirit, which is an article from the Reader. So let's get into it. So I feel like my key takeaway from this article I'm reading is primarily communication, even though the authors kind of talk about not like necessarily verbal communication, but like kind of internal communication that we have with God, or even just in general. I just feel like that was mainly highlighted through this reading. The authors first talk about the heart and how God created our hearts to connect with others relationally, and I feel like connection is established through communication, whether that's verbal or not. The authors also talk about memory, explicit and implicit memory, and I feel like memory also ties into communication, just because our eyes communicate with our brains to kind of retain or record information that affects our emotions, perceptions, and bodily sensations. And experiences that are recorded from our body communicating with like itself results in that interpretation of attachment. So our attachment is primarily developed through communication, whether it's our eyes communicating with our brain, or whether it's like anatomically or even just like verbally or non-verbally. I feel like it's just really interesting how all of it really connects together. This can be like as early as we are infants, which is a quote that I chose as my favorite point because I just found it interesting. And also relationally by instinct communication, which is on page 241, which says, it means that one person allows his or her state of mind to be influenced by another state of mind. Another way to say this is that emotions are contagious, and this is true. Through empathy, emotions can be contagious to just being in presence with other people, as well as just like our belief system is developed relationally primarily, or even individually, but primarily our relationships give us more perspective on certain things, I feel like. And then also communication is essential for a secure attachment relationship because it is developed early on from repeated experiences with caregivers who are constantly emotionally available and responsive. I feel like this point is really interesting just because of the responsive aspect in this point. I feel like all of us need a response kind of for our validation in a way, and in a way that's kind of why many people struggle with their relationship with God, because we're always having like conversations with God and then he talks to us non-verbally through our minds and through our hearts, but sometimes people can feel really stuck in which their belief system is just kind of where we think that God is just not responsive whatsoever. And this ties with like a point that we learned early on how psychology and theology are kind of linked together, and if one is affected, it affects the other, and vice versa. But yeah, the author highlights at the very end that it's important for people in our life to not like give us words. Actually, let me like pull that up because I think I typed it wrong on my document. But I really like this. It says, in other words, we remember how important people in our life feel about us, not in words, but in our emotions, body, and images, and a gut level type of memory. And I just find that quote really fascinating just because of honestly, like, kind of ties back to like kind of love language in a way, like emotion can be tied to words of affirmation, gift giving, whatever, our body, physical affection, and yeah, and just like kind of how our love language is developed through memories, and it just like kind of allows us to like just sit in there, like kind of like our experiences, not necessarily conversations, kind of shape our memory and our levels of attachment. But yeah, instead of like verbal communication, that's what I put at the very end. So my favorite quote is on page 241. I just found this quote very interesting, and it's, one of the main functions of the attachment system is that it establishes a relationship in which an infant's immature brain literally uses the mature functions of the parent's brain to help organize and regulate his or her own functioning. I found this quote so interesting just because it's like, it was like eye-opening mainly just because like we're expected an infant to learn like their parents' lifestyle, their like movements, words, all that stuff, and it's like you're learning from like a very mature person intellectually, physically, and all those key factors, and an infant that brain is basically just like starting from like square one, is adapting to that, and it learns based off the parents from that aspect, which is just so interesting. I can't really find like the words to like further describe it, but yeah, I just think that quote was really cool. Do I agree with the author's perspective? For the most part, I do. But yeah, I basically do. And the reason why I do is because I just feel like the way that the author discusses about emotions, as well as like also like attachment. We're still in the theme of attachment in this reading. It's just very like eye-opening, I guess, and it made me learn like a lot more about attachment and how it's not necessarily developed like verbally, but also non-verbal. And this is primarily seen through my relationship with God, and like seeing the author more discuss about the theological aspect of attachment was really interesting. Let me try to find like the interesting quote. Like when the author was discussing God filter, it's really not an exact replica of attachment filters with humans. So like attachment with God is another kind of attachment that is kind of indescribable. And it's that gut level knowledge, and I actually really like just that terminology, gut level knowledge about like oneself, just because it's like I just know this is right. It's kind of like intuition in a way, but yeah, and I feel like there's not really an attachment that we can describe that is comparable to our attachment with God. And yeah, there's really, I mean, it could fall into like secure attachment. However, like I feel like because it emphasizes that we can't really relate that to like human attachment styles, that it does have like the healthy aspects of secure attachment, but it's entirely different. And then how does this information relate to your own experiences and beliefs? I don't know. I really don't know. I just feel like just when like the author was talking about the God filter, I feel like that just was like resonated with me deeply, in a sense of like really we can't have like a known attachment to God. It's just an attachment that is just natural and flowing because God created us and we are God image like, and it's expected of us to kind of just naturally flow with emotions with God. And then also like a point that I saw like in the reading was like I feel like there's been a lot of like emotional flooding that's been occurring lately, especially with the election, and due to the fact that there's a ton of global negative emotions right now, I feel like it's really affecting me personally right now, just because it's all very overwhelming. Although I'm kind of like in the middle politically, I just feel like the distraught of like the Democratic Party, as well as the celebration of the Republican Party, is just kind of like overwhelming. And yeah, I just feel like that's kind of just where I'm at with that. And then what question would I pose to the larger group? I would just say, in what kind of ways do you tend to be like more reliant on non-verbal communication or verbal communication? I feel like with me, I'm really like words of affirmation, and I really love verbal reassurance a lot of the time. So this is a very subjective question, but like, do you prefer more like emotional communication with that like gut level response, or do you need like the verbal validation in a way? But yeah, I can't wait to hear your guys' thoughts in class, so I'll see you soon.